My name is Edith Ramirez, and my partner's name is Andrea Aguilar, and our topic is solitary confinement. What is solitary confinement? Solitary confinement refers to a method of incarceration when an individual is confined to a singular cell devoid of substantial interaction with fellow inmates. There exist three distinct forms of solitary confinement, including administrative segregation, punitive segregation, and protective custody. Types of solitary confinement. Administrative segregation is the utilization of administrative isolation that is implemented by correctional authorities in instances where an incarcerated individual is perceived to present a potential risk to their own well-being, the safety of others, or the overall security of the correctional facility, without necessarily warranting a distinct disciplinary measure. Additionally, it is employed for those who have recently arrived during the period in which their security level is being evaluated. Individuals who are placed in administrative segregation within correctional facilities frequently experience prolonged periods of isolation within their cells, with restricted opportunities for time spent outside of their cells. The conditions, although subject to variation, tend to be more stringent compared to those experienced by the broader prison population. Punitive segregation, alternatively referred to as disciplinary segregation, is known as the whole, which is implemented as a corrective measure for incarcerated individuals who have contravened the established rules and regulations within a correctional facility. The primary purpose of implementing this measure is to discourage inappropriate behavior and uphold a state of organization inside the establishment. Incarcerated individuals placed in punitive segregation are commonly subjected to heightened limitations accompanied by extended durations of solitary confinement. Individuals with this context may experience restricted availability of personal belongings and privileges, with limited opportunities for time spent outside of their confinement. Protective custody is the utilization of protective custody which serves the purpose of segregating incarcerated individuals from the larger inmate population in instances where there exists a sustained and credible danger to their well-being, such as the potential for physical harm or persistent harassment originating from convicts, frequently employed in cases involving witnesses, informants, or individuals of notable prominence. Incarcerated individuals placed in protective custody are typically segregated from the broader inmate population. However, they may have relatively improved living conditions compared to those subjected to punitive segregation. Individuals in question potentially possesses the ability to avail themselves of specific advantages and amenities. Typical duration of solitary confinement is approximately 30 days, although in certain cases it might extend to several years or even decades. Inmates who have spent long periods in isolation may have trouble reintegrating into society after release. Social and coping abilities might suffer from isolation, making it harder to acclimate to life outside of confinement. Solitary confinement cells tend to be small, windowless, and unfurnished. Personal items, educational resources, and entertainment are generally restricted for inmates. Mental health is prolonged during solitary confinement, which may cause or worsen anxiety, mental problems, or psychosis. Isolation and stressful surroundings may worsen mental health concerns, especially for individuals with previous mental health issues. Sensory deprivation in solitary inmates receive minimal natural light, sensory inputs, and environmental stimulation. Sensory deprivation may cause confusion, hallucinations, and cognitive decline. Without regular sensory input, time, location, and reality may be difficult to sustain. Solitary confinement may cause great stress and psychological anguish, which can lead to self-harm and suicide. Some people deal with emotional distress by self-harming due to loneliness and hopelessness in confinement. Many solitary prisoners describe PTSD-like symptoms, being confined in a small enclosure with limited social interaction that might have lasting psychological effects. During the 18th century, religious groups were looking for ways to punish criminals instead of physically punishing them. The very first experiment was made in the United States in 1829 by Dr. Benjamin Rush. A Philadelphia jail started an experiment to punish criminals with solitary confinement. At this point, solitary confinement was considered more humane than other types of punishments. Solitary confinement and segregation and rehabilitation are different types of punishments. Solitary confinement is the first type of punishment which was created by the first twisted serial killer, and he was considered to be so dangerous he was put in a sealed glass cell underneath a prison in Yorkshire. Segregation commonly is used in prisons as a form of punishment for breaking rules and are usually categorized into groups. These groups are usually put into sexual offenders, repeat offenders, young prisoners, inmates who have been sentenced to death, short-term imprisonment, and inmates who are considered to be dangerous. Prisoners who have a history of drug abuse are put into rehab as a form of punishment. The first person who survived solitary confinement the longest. Albert Woodfox was one of the first prisoners who survived solitary confinement the longest. He was 44 years old and died at 75 years of age. It is said that Albert died during the pandemic when he contracted coronavirus. Albert was in a very small cell where he was facing claustrophobia, mistreatment, and other forms of torture. During his time in solitary, he taught himself how to read and create an organization for strikes that involved prison conditions and racism once he was done serving his time. And he was only allowed to leave his cell to shower and to exercise without any communications with people. Albert Woodfox was put into solitary confinement for more than 4 decades at Angola Prison in Louisiana. He committed a crime of armed robbery and killed a white guard. Albert and 2 other people were put in prison for the same crime and were known as Angola 3, then was released in 2006, which was when he created protests and strikes. Dodd Tuleman served his sentence in New Jersey State Prison, where he was put in solitary confinement. During his time in solitary, like any other prisoner, he didn't interact with anyone and had free time to shower and regular time which was given to inmates to get air without any communications with people. Dodd now finds it difficult to make small talk, keep eye contact, and prefers to keep by himself.